Think your last flu was bad? At least it did not turn your body into a leaking garden sprinkler, make blood escape from every available exit, or force you to dance until your feet filed for divorce. History was not just kings, wars, and suspiciously large hats. It was also a medical horror show run by doctors whose best diagnosis was usually, maybe Saturn is angry. Today, we are diving into 4 of the most disturbing diseases ever recorded. One made healthy men sweat themselves toward death in a matter of hours. Another devastated millions while victims bled from places they did not even know could bleed. A third slowly destroyed the brain because one protein woke up and chose violence. And the last one turned an entire city into the worst dance challenge imaginable. These are not legends. These are crazy historical facts, pure weird history, and yes, that actually happened. But the most terrifying part is not how these diseases killed people. It is what doctors and city officials did to cure them. First up, let us travel to England in the year 1485. When the streets smelled like boiled garbage, the drinking water had visible personality, and medical science was basically one confused man staring at your urine in a glass jar. The Wars of the Roses had just dragged the country through decades of violence, political chaos, and enough family betrayal to make reality television look emotionally healthy. Then, as if England had not suffered enough, a mysterious illness arrived and immediately began turning healthy people into human lawn sprinklers. It became known as the English sweating sickness, which is a beautifully straightforward name. Medieval doctors did not waste time on branding. You sweated. You got sick. Sweating sickness. Done. No marketing department required. The disease first appeared in 1485 and returned in several major outbreaks before vanishing after 1551. Nobody knows exactly where it came from. Some historians have suggested that foreign mercenaries may have carried it into England near the end of the Wars of the Roses. Others have proposed viruses spread by rodents. The official scientific conclusion remains. Something horrible showed up, wrecked everybody's afternoon, and refused to leave fingerprints. One of the earliest detailed accounts came from the French physician Thomas Forestier, who caught the disease while living in London. Instead of doing the normal thing and screaming into a pillow, Forestier carefully recorded what was happening to him. Decades later, the English physician John Caius produced an even more detailed description, and the symptoms were absolutely unhinged. The illness could begin with a sudden sense of terror. Not ordinary anxiety like realizing you replied to the entire office email chain. This was crushing, unexplained dread. Victims then developed violent chills, intense headaches, pain in the neck and shoulders, dizziness, exhaustion, and a racing heartbeat. Soon afterward came the main event, enormous amounts of sweat pouring from the body. Imagine waking up perfectly healthy, eating breakfast, and then suddenly leaking like a cheap, inflatable pool. Doctor, I cannot stop sweating. Have you offended Mars recently? I do not think so. Interesting. Let us remove some blood. That was not far from actual medieval medicine. Many physicians still believed in miasma theory, the idea that diseases spread through corrupted or poisonous air. Considering how medieval English cities smelled, this theory probably felt emotionally correct even though it was scientifically wrong. Some doctors also blamed the stars and planets, because apparently Saturn had nothing better to do than personally assassinate English merchants. The disease moved terrifyingly fast. A victim could go from healthy to critically ill within a few hours. Forestier described cases in which death came only 3 hours after the first symptoms. Other patients died within a single day. One especially dangerous sign was overwhelming sleepiness. Physicians warned families not to let patients fall asleep because many who did never woke again. So picture yourself burning with fever, soaked in sweat, shaking uncontrollably, and surrounded by relatives slapping you awake like the world's most aggressive alarm clock. Please, let me rest. No, Thomas, sleeping is illegal now. Surviving the first 24 hours usually meant the patient had a better chance of recovery. But estimates suggest that some outbreaks may have killed between roughly 1/3 and 1/2 of those infected. Even stranger, the disease often appeared to strike healthy, wealthy, socially active men rather than only the poor, elderly, or malnourished. One theory is that these men spent more time packed into courts, businesses, inns, and other crowded indoor spaces where infection could spread easily. The sickness returned repeatedly, with major outbreaks in 1485, 1508, 1517, 1528, and 1551. The outbreak of 1528 spread across much of northern Europe, yet France was largely spared, which is especially awkward if French soldiers really helped introduce it. Then the disease simply disappeared. No cure, no final explanation, no dramatic announcement. It just stopped returning, leaving behind one of the strangest examples of crazy historical facts and a permanent reminder that weird history sometimes smells terrible and sweats through its shirt. That actually happened, and medieval England somehow continued functioning. Now let us leave sweaty England and head to 16th century Mexico, where history decided that one civilization-ending disaster was apparently not enough. The Spanish arrived in 1519, and within a few years the Aztec Empire had been shattered by warfare, political alliances, famine, forced labor, and smallpox. Smallpox alone killed millions of indigenous people who had no previous immunity to it. You would think history might allow everyone a quiet recovery period after that. It did not. Around 1545, a new epidemic erupted across the Mexican highlands. The Nahuatl-speaking population called it Cocoliztli, a word commonly used for pestilence or deadly disease. This was not simply smallpox returning with a fake mustache. The symptoms looked different, moved quickly, and terrified both indigenous communities and Spanish observers. It often began with a high fever, severe headache, intense thirst, weakness, and vertigo. Not the fun kind of dizziness where you spin around at a party and fall into a lamp. This was the kind where standing upright became a luxury feature. Then, the disease entered its truly horrifying phase. Victims developed severe pain in the chest and abdomen. Their tongues turned dark. Swelling appeared around the neck and face. Blood could flow from the nose, mouth, ears, and other parts of the body that absolutely should not be participating in a group evacuation. Imagine being a healer during this outbreak. He is bleeding badly. Should we stop the bleeding? No, I have a better idea. Let us remove more blood. European physicians used treatments such as bloodletting because medicine at the time had a remarkable ability to see a person losing blood and conclude that the problem was still too much blood. Indigenous healers used herbal remedies, cooling techniques, and spiritual practices. Both groups tried to help, but people were dying far too quickly. The epidemic of 1545 may have killed somewhere between 5 million and 15 million people. A second major outbreak began in 1576 and killed millions more. Exact numbers are debated, but the demographic collapse was catastrophic. Entire communities lost workers, parents, leaders, farmers, healers, and children. Food production fell. Social structures weakened. The disease did not merely kill individuals. It helped tear apart what remained of a civilization already under enormous pressure. So what caused it? Modern researchers have proposed several possibilities, including a severe hemorrhagic fever, a rodent-borne disease, drought-related transmission, or a form of salmonella infection. Some evidence supports particular theories, but no explanation has fully solved the mystery. It may even have involved more than one disease striking vulnerable populations at the same time. What we do know is that the indigenous population suffered far more severely than the Spanish population. Malnutrition, forced labor, displacement, overcrowding, and previous epidemics had already weakened many communities. The disease did not attack everyone equally because history rarely does. That is what makes Cocoliztli one of the darkest examples of weird history. It was not only a mysterious epidemic, it arrived after conquest, exploited human suffering, and turned survival itself into a full-time job with terrible benefits. Another entry in the book of crazy historical facts, and one more disaster that actually happened. Next, we leave Mexico and travel to the eastern highlands of Papua New Guinea, where one of the strangest diseases in medical history began with something that was never intended to be violent. The four people practiced a funerary tradition known as endocannibalism. When a family member died, relatives consumed parts of the body as an act of mourning, remembrance, and spiritual respect. This was not a horror movie situation where someone chased a neighbor through the jungle with a fork. It was a sacred ritual performed for people they loved. Unfortunately, biology does not care about cultural intentions. The disease was called Kuru, a word associated with trembling or shaking. It was especially common among poor women and children because they were usually responsible for preparing the bodies and were more likely to consume the brain and other nervous tissue. Men often ate muscle or avoided the ritual meal entirely, which accidentally gave them the healthiest dining preference in the village. Kuru was caused by prions, and prions are proof that nature occasionally gets bored and starts writing psychological horror. A prion begins as a normal protein. Proteins help your body repair cells, build tissue, and perform countless useful tasks. But sometimes one protein folds into the wrong shape. Instead of quietly accepting its failure like a respectable molecule, it bumps into other proteins and forces them to fold incorrectly too. Think of it as one terrible employee entering an office and convincing the entire company to stop working destroy the furniture, and scream at the printer. These damaged proteins accumulated in the brain, gradually destroying nerve cells and turning healthy tissue into something resembling a sponge. Unlike bacteria or viruses, prions were not alive. They had no genetic material, no metabolism, and no evil master plan. They were simply badly folded proteins causing catastrophic damage through pure molecular incompetence. The first symptoms often seemed minor. A person might experience headaches, trembling, or difficulty walking in a straight line. Maybe they stumbled occasionally or struggled to coordinate simple movements. You seem unsteady. I am fine. You just fell into a cooking pot. The ground moved. As the disease progressed, the trembling became worse. Victims lost control of their arms and legs, fell repeatedly, and could no longer stand without help. Their emotions also became unstable. They might shift rapidly between fear, sadness, aggression, and sudden bursts of uncontrollable laughter. That laughter gave Kuru one of its disturbing nicknames, the laughing sickness. But there was nothing joyful about it. Victims were not laughing because something was funny. Their damaged brains were firing the wrong signals, producing laughter at moments of confusion, pain, or terror. Eventually, the disease reached its final stage. Patients became unable to walk, speak clearly, or control their movements. Swallowing became difficult, which meant eating and drinking slowly became impossible. Many victims died from starvation, dehydration, infection, or complications caused by being completely bedridden. Unlike the English sweating sickness or Cocoliztli, Kuru did not usually kill within a few frantic hours or days. It could take months after symptoms appeared, forcing families to watch someone slowly lose control of their body while remaining trapped inside it. Researchers, including physician Vincent Zigas and scientist D. Carlton Gajdasek, began documenting the disease during the 1950s. Later work by anthropologists Shirley Lindenbaum and Robert Glass helped establish the connection between Kuru and funerary practices. Once the forest stopped consuming human remains, new infections declined dramatically. But Kuru had one final biological insult waiting in storage. Prion diseases can have extraordinarily long incubation periods. Some infected people did not develop symptoms until decades after exposure. The ritual could stop, the village could change, and the disease could still emerge years later like the world's slowest and most unwanted subscription service. There is still no cure for Kuru or any other prion disease. Once symptoms begin, the outcome is fatal. Doctors can provide supportive care, but they cannot reverse the damage or persuade the proteins to unfold their terrible life choices. Kuru remains one of the most disturbing examples of crazy historical facts, weird history, and something that actually happened. It was not caused by a curse, an angry spirit, or poisoned air. It was caused by a protein folding incorrectly and deciding to drag the entire brain down with it. Finally, we arrive in Strasbourg in the summer of 1518, where one woman stepped into the street and accidentally launched the worst dance challenge in human history. Her name was Frau Trophia. According to historical accounts, she began dancing in public without music, celebration, or any obvious reason. At first, this probably looked like one person having a very intense personal moment. Then, she kept going. For hours, then for days. She danced until she collapsed from exhaustion, rested briefly, stood back up, and started again. No band, no wedding, no medieval nightclub offering 2-for-1 mead. Just one terrified woman moving as if her body had been hijacked by an invisible choreographer with anger issues. Within days, more people joined her. Then, dozens. Eventually, contemporary reports claimed that hundreds were dancing through the streets. Some may have participated willingly out of curiosity, but many appeared unable to control themselves. Witnesses described exhausted faces, desperate movements, and people continuing long after their feet had blistered and their bodies had begged them to stop. This was not a party. It was cardio with a body count. The dancers twisted, jumped, stumbled, and collapsed in the summer heat. Some reportedly suffered heart attacks, strokes, dehydration, or complete physical exhaustion. Exact death figures are uncertain, but the event was serious enough to terrify the city. Naturally, local authorities responded with the calm wisdom of people who had absolutely no idea what was happening. Doctors claimed the dancers were suffering from overheated blood and needed to keep moving until the sickness burned itself out. So city officials built stages, cleared public spaces, and hired musicians to encourage the dancing. They cannot stop dancing? Then give them better music. That seems dangerous. I am wearing an official hat. Trust me. The musicians played, the dancers danced harder, and the situation became worse. It was the medical equivalent of treating a house fire by installing a gasoline fountain. Eventually, the city changed its approach. Music and public dancing were banned, and the remaining sufferers were taken to a religious shrine for prayer and ritual treatment. Over time, the outbreak faded. Historians still debate what caused it. One theory blames ergot poisoning from moldy rye, which can trigger hallucinations and convulsions. But ergotism usually causes painful spasms and severe illness, not coordinated dancing for weeks. The more widely accepted explanation is mass psychogenic illness. Strasbourg had suffered famine, disease, poverty, and extreme religious anxiety. Under that pressure, one person's breakdown may have spread through suggestion and fear until the entire city became trapped in the same nightmare. Whatever the cause, the dancing plague remains one of the strangest pieces of weird history. Hundreds of people danced without joy, officials hired a band to make it worse, and yes, that actually happened. Crazy historical facts rarely come with choreography, but this one brought its own soundtrack. So, what did we learn? Medieval England turned healthy men into leaking water balloons. 16th century Mexico faced a mysterious epidemic that made the apocalypse look underqualified. Kuru proved that one badly folded protein can ruin an entire brain, and Strasbourg showed us that when hundreds of people cannot stop dancing, hiring musicians is probably not the medical breakthrough you think it is. These crazy historical facts remind us that weird history is often just regular history wearing a blood-stained clown suit. And the wildest part is that all of it, that actually happened. Humanity survived these disasters without antibiotics, modern laboratories, or even one doctor saying, maybe we should stop blaming Saturn. So the next time you complain about a runny nose, remember that at least your physician is unlikely to drain your blood, prescribe a dance marathon, or recommend eating your relatives. For more crazy historical facts, weird history, and stories that actually happened, hit that subscribe button. Because if you do not learn from history, history may come back sweating, bleeding, laughing, and dancing directly into your living room. Thanks for watching.